Would you mind telling us about your early days in UCD and moving from your undergraduate degree in physics here and moving to a PhD then?
I had a wonderful time in university as a physics student. I was doing exactly what I wanted to do. And I learned an awful lot as an undergraduate, but primarily I learned how to think and how to analyze. And in the enthusiasm of getting a first, I got a first. My goal in life was to get a first. And it was interesting. I did very well in first year, physics, chemistry, maths, and math physics. I did okay in second year because I got involved in student politics. I did poorly in third year. And that was a wake-up call. And I really worked my socks off in fourth year. And thought I understood everything. And I got the results. And I was admittedly the last of 5 firsts that year. And I was over the moon. And flushed with that enthusiasm, I decided to do a PhD. And I'm a great fan of Neil Porter, the professor of astrophysics. And I did a PhD in gamma ray astronomy. And I had a great time, but I didn't have anything particular that was mine that I wanted to do until I discovered that I needed to use computation to analyze the data. And I should back up. In my fourth year, in 1967, I did a course in Fortran 2 with format, which was the latest technology. It was the coming thing. And I came out of that course and I said to anybody who would listen to me, well, there's one thing I know. I will never spend any more time in my life with those damn stupid things called computers. And 18 months later, I had to learn Fortran, to really learn Fortran. And I had to adopt a program which had been developed in the States for the Arecibo telescope to translate or transpose timing measurements on a particular point of Earth to the barycentric point, which is the weighted point of the universe as measured close to the Earth, and try and understand that, convert it from a CDC computer to an IBM computer, which is less precision. And so I got involved in computing, and that fascinated me.
Big change of mind in the 18 months.
When I finished my PhD, I got offered a postdoc in Bristol. And although my enthusiasm was for computing, I took that postdoc, and I was married with a child at the time. It was a 3-year contract, 1 year at a time. And I sort of woke up in Bristol thinking, is this a career? Do I want this as a career? There's no future here. There's no long-term future, and I have long-term responsibilities. So I decided to quit being a researcher, not that I was a good researcher, but quit being a researcher, and do something else. Again, I was very fortunate in meeting people who helped me, interviewed me, recommended me to join what was called a computer consultancy at that time, a company called System Dynamics, led by Tom McGovern, who later became a great mentor of mine. And that was in 72. And I worked for System Dynamics for 5 years and learned an extraordinary amount of stuff. First thing I learned was how much I didn't know.
It's always a good thing to know.
And fortunately, Tom McGovern, as a mentor of mine, taught me an awful lot of things that I needed to know: how to write, how to express myself, how to keep to the point, how to write a communication that effectively communicated what I intended at the moment to the recipient at another moment in another context.
There's so much more beyond the technical details that you'd learn in an undergrad or a PhD even.
Communicating is a very difficult skill, very important for people, and something that is probably not emphasized enough. Anyway, so that was my transition from physics student to computing, which I think answers the question that you asked.
Yeah. And then, it's funny, you went from not liking computers and Fortran and the goodness that was Fortran, it still is, to enjoying it a lot more throughout your PhD, and then you went to computer consultancy, and next thing you know, you are director of computing services.
Yes.
In UCT.
Yes.
Quite a career path in terms of...
Well, it's illustrative of, or indicative of, the amount I learned in 5 years in a business consultancy. Not only about technology, but accounting, management, project management, communication, writing, all the skills to be a consultant. And I'd always been interested in going back to university. I suppose my parents were very influential. They regarded it as an academic job, which I'd obviously failed in, or a university position as essentially worthy, whereas working for industry was not necessarily the right thing for you, my boy. So I'd always had this hankering to go back into the university. And as I went through those 5 years and learnt these skills, the job I identified, indeed, I'm told that one of the first things I said to Tom McGovern, the boss, when I joined there, was that my ideal job was to run computing in a university. And the job came up. In fact, the job came up in Cork, UCC first of all, and I applied for it, and they decided I was not the person that they wanted.
Fair loss.
That's what I thought, yes. Anyway, the job came up in UCD, and I interviewed for it, and somewhat to my amazement, I got it. And I was over the moon, I have to say. Here was the job that I thought I was fitted for and could really make a good job doing, which was running the computing services for the academic community in UCD. Anyway, I ran the infrastructure for computing. At that stage, it was one computer, an IBM 36050, one remote terminal line printer in engineering on the first data communications line in the country, running initially at 2400 bits per second and later upgraded to 9600 bits per second. And it ran a programming language called APL, an interactive programming language called APL, which stood for A Programming Language.
We've always been great with names.
It's probably no longer remembered. And so my role was to try and build up the computing resources for the whole campus. And that I did, and I think did pretty successfully. So I started in the punch card era, and when I left in '99, 22 years later, we were in the internet era with thousands of computers on desktops, a campus network linked to the internet and so on. Very early on in that time, in fact, even while I was at System Dynamics, I became interested in networking, computer networking. In fact, I attended one of the first major conferences, or the first major conference in Ireland on computing in, I think it was called a colloquium, something like that, in Trinity College, at which the great and the good came along and talked about networking. And I got my company to System Dynamics to let me go there, and I was fascinated, really fascinated. The idea that people remotely could use computers remotely, in all sorts of ways, and that you could build a communications infrastructure for researchers that allow them to access computing and resources. So that was one of the things that I brought with me to UCD as director of the Computer Center. And in 1982, I made the first proposal for what became HEANet, the Higher Education Authority Network.
You had this interest in networking technologies.
Exactly.
And you were in UCD. And at some point during your time in UCD, you were offered the secondment to the National Science Foundation.
Yes, and there's an interesting story there, many interesting stories there. I met Ira Fuchs and another of his friends, who's now a good friend of mine, Larry Landweber, professor of computer science in Wisconsin, and chatted to them, and they told me that CSNet, the computer science network in the US, was looking for a director, and they thought that with my background, I'd be an ideal candidate, and they recommended me. So I was in California benchmarking an Amdahl computer as a replacement for our IBM computer. When I phoned Larry and I said, I'm in California, where do I go on the United States to talk to these CS people? And he said, well, they're based in Boulder, Colorado, but don't go there because the chairman is in Washington and I'll arrange for you to see him. Oh, and he said, by the way, the National Science Foundation is also looking for a director of networking. They have some supercomputing network they want built. Why don't you go and talk to them as well? So took the red-eye shuttle to Washington, D.C., joined this meeting of the experts from the academic world on networking in the US, and started chatting about the need for a network for US science and research. Jet-lagged as I was only 20 minutes into that meeting when I realized these giants of the networking world were kind of ordinary. You know, I could. So I picked up the marker pen and went to the whiteboard and sketched what I thought needed to be done for a national network. Then I went on to the National Science Foundation and interviewed there, and the result was I got both offers.
Lucky choice.
And just fixing on the National Science Foundation program director of networking, I chose that because I thought that sounded, well, it was much less defined, but it sounded more interesting, sounded to have more impact. And the job was to build a network or networks to allow supercomputer users remotely use the national supercomputer centers. The Congress, the US Congress, had approved the National Supercomputing Initiative in 1984. Yes, 1984. $500 million, $500 million, which was a significant sum of money back then. And the proposers of that, the academics who proposed it, also proposed that within that budget, 10% would be set aside for networking, undefined, but for networking, so that supercomputer users could use these computers from their home workstation. That was my role. And I got it, as I said, because I had cred. And I decided that what we really needed was a network of networks with a common communications protocol so that any workstation on any network could communicate to any other workstation, or indeed to a supercomputer, on a different network. This network of networks, our internet idea, and that's what I stood up in front of the National Science Council, which is the scientific, the governing body of the National Science Foundation, as I understand it, and late in January gave a presentation with a single overhead foil. There was no PowerPoint at this stage, scribbled on a piece of plastic, put it on an overhead projector, and to the astonishment of my colleagues, spoke for 25 minutes on that one foil about my vision for this internet, this network of network, this network based on this set of networks interconnected based on a set of standards which would achieve the aim.
And what was the reaction?
Very positive.
Oh, okay.
The only question I really got was from someone who sort of knew the technology, can't remember who it was, and queried the accuracy of my diagram. To which I said, this is a schematic, this is an illustration, this is not...
I drew this 5 minutes ago.
In a hurry.
Yeah.
Exactly. So with that start, I became Mr. TCP/IP in Washington, because the only set of standard protocols, open, available standard protocols for an internet, were the DARPA protocols called the TCP/IP protocols, the internet protocols, the IP protocols. And I mandated that any new network funded by the NSFNet program had to adopt these technologies. A couple of networks had been funded prior to that using different technology, and I eventually agreed that these would have to transition or migrate. And that's what I spent my time in 15 months as it was in the US, essentially going around the country and telling people about this tremendous new opportunity that they too, because at that point, connecting to the internet was connecting to the ARPANET. Connecting to the ARPANET meant you had a defense contract of some sort in computer science, and were among the prestige universities.
Very limited access.
Very limited access, prestige universities. That had been somewhat moderated by CSNet, which extended email to computer science, but only to computer science. And I decided that this network was going to be a network for all, an internet, for all science and engineering research across the United States, of all academic science and engineering research. Because I argued the goal of the supercomputer program was to give access to more scientists to get access to and use supercomputers.
And I'd ask the question of, do you think at the time you thought it would go in the direction it did and to where we are now? But I think you're quite famous for having as your email tagline, I told you this thing would catch on.
I told you this internet thing would catch on, yes.
Well, I suppose building on that though, did you foresee, I suppose, or have the thought of what it could become in the sense it is today with the likes of Internet of Things, this massively connected, always connected, I suppose, situation that we find ourselves in?
The honest answer is no. Yes, we were enormously ambitious. Our ambition was that all researchers in the United States of America, in universities, all of them, and all the institutions would be connected to this network of networks and have the access to these resources.
Given that you have the experience, where would you see things going? What is the next big thing or the next big disruptor? Or I suppose you could even break that down to, positive and negative, or challenge and opportunity.
Challenge and opportunity. Well, let me start with the fact that I probably should have done computer science if it had been available back in 1962, 63. It started in 63. One of the first students to come out to the Belfield campus in the physics building.
They moved, yeah.
The next big thing, so many times I've dealt with the next big thing. It tends to be fashionable and it tends not to be the next big thing. But if one were to choose, I think the next big thing for computer science, which I think is, by the way, an absolutely wonderful discipline, understanding. I think the major contribution to science and technology of computer science has been the concept of levels of abstraction, being able to develop tools and services, and then bury them and build on top. And then having built an application on top of these services, to turn that into a service and bury it and build on top of that. One of the risks I see in computer science education, I don't know if this is a real risk, but I hear it is that a lot of students only see the surface and don't really understand what's going on in the lower levels. And that can lead, I think, to terrible mistakes, misunderstandings. But you asked me the next big thing. Well, AI is obviously, machine learning. Machine learning in particular.
I don't think even the research community knows.
Well, you know, machine learning, this particular aspect of AI is clearly quite astonishing. Even the idea that computers can be taught, that is, a program can be written to instruct them to compete against another computer, and that they can learn by parametric means from each other's interaction is really interesting. Disappointingly, and there's a lot of AI going on, machine learning AI that's going on, that's really interesting and really powerful, and is predicated on a good base of data, a well-considered, expertly defined set of data. Unfortunately, Chat GPT, the most recent next big thing.
The latest and greatest.
Pardon me?
The latest and greatest.
The latest and greatest has been trained on the data that's available in social media. I nearly said on the internet, but I want to segue sideways and say, look, that's not the internet. The internet is the communications infrastructure. What runs on top of it, the web, the applications, and social media, are using the internet as the communication infrastructure. They are not the internet. And there's a lot of casual commentary about the internet, which includes social media, and distinguishing between those things is really important. Anyway, ChatGPT has been trained on the information that's available on the internet, on social media. Much of that information is inaccurate, is wrong, is misleading,
and varying levels of
false, is deliberately misleading or false, is basically, pardon the expression, is basically crap. And so an enormous mistake has been made by machine learning, training ChatGPT and similar things on the content of social media. Because that means that inherently it's not to be trusted. It is built on obviously lots of good, correct data, but also lots of terrible data, including personal data, including copyright data, including confidential data that has been leaked on the internet, and so on. This is a disaster for the advancement of machine learning, because already, and this is what I think is the next big thing, is the regulation of the internet. The regulation, of those applications on the internet, like social media, that is the most pressing need to address, and the next big thing. There has been, over the last many decades, a glorification of disruption, of technology, of the next big thing, without any consideration of the societal impacts of those big things.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think then to bring it back to UCD and to suppose people who are looking at maybe considering computer science in UCD, even then to go on to current undergrads, and I think even then to bring it on to people who are finishing their undergrads and maybe considering something like a postgraduate degree. Would you have any advice for those different stages about what to consider, what to evaluate, what to weigh up?
Well, first of all, follow your instincts. You only get one chance at an undergraduate education usually, and the point system confuses people as to how they should make choices for that one opportunity. Point system was invented by Joe McHale, the Secretary Bursar of UCD, a long time back. So UCD is somewhat responsible for this. When you're looking at doing an undergraduate degree, do what interests you. Do what you think you would like. Because in UCD, and because in any good university, you get an education that teaches you how to think. It provides you some facts, preferably really difficult things to think about, to develop your way of thinking, to understand how to take facts and understand and develop some sort of coherent view of that set of facts. In computer science, to build these layers, that I was talking about earlier.
The abstractions.
Extraction, layers of abstraction, yes. So I probably, if computer science had been a thing when I was a student doing my matriculation, I probably would have thought about that and probably would have done that, because I would have been introduced to it in school. But there was no such thing at that time. And physics, I really loved physics. I did physics. I did a PhD in the enthusiasm of my physics degree, but really I wasn't a great physicist. I wasn't even a good physicist. But I found a niche, a thing that I was interested in, a way I could contribute by using computation to analyze this data. I went on to become a postdoc, and that was a mistake. I'm one of the very few postdocs, much to the embarrassment of the physics department here in UCD, to have gone to accepted a post and within 6 months to have left it, which is sort of a bit of a no-no.
I think you make up for it though.
Oh, well, I tried to. I tried to have a few contributions. I probably should have done something else, but I got the opportunity of taking up a job in industry. When you're on a path and you have to change path, creates an extraordinary emotional and intellectual crisis. Has this been a waste? How will I cope with this? I'm trained this way and I'm thinking of going that way. So it also needs bravery. At times in your career, you'll need to be brave. At times in your career, you'll have disappointments. You didn't get this job, you didn't get that job. I've had many jobs I didn't get, and I'm greatly relieved that I didn't. They would have been bad choices. So you follow your instincts, you follow your emotions, you follow your interests. And that way you'll have an interesting and worthwhile, emotionally, intellectually, and hopefully financially, career. Computer science students are tremendously privileged to be at the forefront of technology and at the forefront of the impact of technology on society. So enjoy it.
Thanks, Dennis, for taking the time to talk to us today. It was a wonderful interview to give from my side, and I'm sure there's many gems of information in it for those who are watching out of interest, for those who are considering a degree in computer science. They're already in a degree in computer science or are looking to further their education with a postgraduate. Thanks very much.
Thank you.